What's the craziest science fiction book you've ever seen? The craziest science fiction movie, series, what is it, Black Mirror? Twilight Zone? The Outer Limits? What is it really? And if you go back and you look at a lot of the Outer Limits episodes or Twilight Zone, and you're like, wow, yeah, that stuff was really out of this world when it was happening, and now so much of the science fiction realm is just becoming real. And the Panopticon, which is basically the government's being able to see everything and hear everything that we do. But basically, it's really done through the technocratic organizations, Facebook, Google, which are just, let's say that they are arms of the intelligence groups. They were funded by both. Both Facebook and Google were created by the CIA. And why is that? Well, because why should we have to try to spy on people when we can socially engineer them to want to be able to tell us everything about them? I think it was in the late 70s or somewhere around there that the CIA basically said, our number one goal is to have people spy on themselves and to have just people tell us what we want to know willfully. If we can get them to do that, then our job is complete, and everything that we really want and need to be able to control the country, ostensibly to keep it safe, will have been achieved. And now we got Facebook and Google censoring people just because they don't like what they're saying, like the Hunter Biden scandal right now. They just don't want it to be talked about. It is 100% true and verified. So the whole fact checkers thing is out the window. It's all been uncovered now. Hey, guess what, guys? Yeah, Facebook and Google, they work for the DNC. They work for the Democrats. And before you get on me about the Democrats and the Republicans, they're the same thing. They're the absolute same thing. Right now, I mean, the best way that I heard it broken down was by What's Her Face. You can look her up on, that's her name. It's like _ What's Her Face _. But she basically said that, and I agree with this, I've been agreed with this for a long time, that the Democratic Party right now is intentionally going nuts and being wildly out of control to basically push Trump to be president. I believe he will win by a landslide, an actual landslide. Like, he will actually have gotten the votes. It wasn't rigged. He will win. And but the Democratic Party is planning all these riots, huge ass riots, regardless if he wins or not, because they have been led to believe that he won't accept the outcome. And my question always to people is, like, if you were running for any kind of office, or if you had run for some kind of position and you knew that there was cheating and you knew that you had won, would you just walk away from it? Would you just be like, nah, I guess that's it? Would you not fight for what you have won and achieved? Not to say that, it isn't all rigged. But I like to ask people that question to see where they're really at with it. Like, where are you at really with, in your own mind, what would you do if someone was cheating you of what you had earned? And a lot of people either don't know how to respond, or respond, well, that's not the same thing, or, well, Trump can't win no matter what, because if he wins, we're all going to die. He's going to put us all in slave camps. It's like, Trump's been president for 4 years now. Are you in a slave camp yet? Or are we all dead yet? What will the next 4 years afford him that the last 4 years didn't? And another question is, okay, so when the lockdowns happened, he literally could have locked down the whole country and took it into martial law. He had the legal authority to do that. And if he was really trying to kill everybody and put us all in camps, he could have done it then. Not that there wouldn't have been huge resistance and outcry, and there would have been straight civil war right then, but just like to ask people, check in on with them and see where they're really at. What is the next 4 years really going to be looking like? And that's my subject for today is, what do you really want the next 4 years to look like? Are you willing to have an endless flow of blood in the streets through a civil war? by your political discontent. Like right now, more Americans than ever are considering a civil war being possible. And I see it as very likely as well. But if we can all come together and drop the politics and say, listen, the government shouldn't have these powers over us. The lockdowns, the mask requirements, the forced injections. There's already forced injections for going to school, period. Taxation without representations, total theft. Government always ends up being slavery, no matter who controls it, no matter how nice it is, no matter how benevolent the slave masters are in the slave system, it's still a system of human slavery. And when I approach people about that in this way, inevitably it's like, well, no, it's not that bad. Or, there's like minarchists, people who are minimal anarchists, or people who want the smallest amount of government, but they still want government. And government by any other name is slavery. And to understand why that is, you have to understand history, and you have to understand what consent really means. If you don't have the ability to consent in or out of agreements, then you're a slave. And because when you're born, you're put into a system that you do not consent to, but you have your social security number, you have your birth certificate, these things all bind you to the corporation of the United States of America, or the United States. And if you follow the lines of law, if you read Black's Law Dictionary book, and you really see how the system works, how through words, words are words, and words are spells, and spells are magic. And this is how people have been convinced through what's written on a piece of paper. They're all of a sudden property. They're all of a sudden owned by someone, usually banks. And these banks create wealth. They create value out of thin air by pressing a keyboard button. Nothing's actually there. There is no money in the bank. If you look up fractional reserve banking, you'll see that if they have $10 in the bank, they can lend out 99. They lend it out again and again and again and again and again and again and again, but they don't actually have the principal there. And so everything in the financial sector is on a house of cards. It always has been, especially since 1970, somewhere in the 1970s, when they passed the Glass-Steagall Act, which basically allowed the corporations to bet on their own bad debt, like to gamble with the money of their clients. And in 1913, the Federal Reserve, which is only federal in name, this is about as Federal Express. I love that little saying. It's a private institution, and they print money out of thin air with no value attached to it, except for the oil standard, basically the petrodollar. The standard reserve currency of the world is the dollar because of our military situation. But as things decline, as the U.S. is more and more corroded from the inside, and Americans are more and more divided, which if you look around, Americans have never been more divided. Probably the last time Americans were this divided was the Civil War. And so America's enemies are creeping in, and they're like, look, all the psyops, all the psychological warfare operations, psyops, that we've been conducting over the years has finally worn away the human dignity and the cohesion of the United States. And not to say that the United States is perfect in any way. It is not. It has not been. And there's many things that need course corrections for sure. And I think a lot of those things are being addressed, but in a very heavy-handed way and in a very divisive way. And the cunning of it must be recognized. It must be accepted that there is a very cunning plan, and it is being perpetrated at every level, mostly through the news networks and through college institutions and stuff, where socialization, communization has been slowly being infiltrated throughout our society over many, many decades. Because the Russians realized they couldn't beat us militarily, and so they're like, okay, we'll go with psychological warfare. We'll turn them against themselves, and then we'll just walk in as the liberators one day. Yep, totally corrupt system. Look at how good we're doing, or this, and that, and All you have to do is look at how many people praise China and love their response to the COVID, situation, how they locked it all down, where they literally were cementing people's doors shut and throwing them in vans and disappearing them. And, tens of, what was it, 21 million cell phones disappeared overnight. And just like you could say that, yeah, there was a huge lack of money, and so they got rid of their second cell phones. I've heard that as well. Or those people disappeared. And those were all the political dissidents that China didn't have the right situation to disappear them. But now they're disappeared. And only the people with the best, highest credit score, social credit score, the people who love the government unconditionally enough are there. And imagine if that happened in the United States. Imagine if you could take it on either or side. Like, imagine if every single Democrat was wiped out, just overnight taken, or every single Republican, and then all of a sudden there was not a single dissenting voice. And against the government, because the positions will always change. What a moderate is, what a conservative, what a libertarian or a liberal. These terms change, and they're being modified all the time. And if you read 1984, and if you read into newspeak and redefining the language of a society very quickly, that's a very fast way to degrade a society and to turn it against itself, to eat itself alive. Because if you've been raised and you've been using a certain set of vocabulary words and you understand what they mean for a very long time, and then all of a sudden someone new comes along and says you can't say that, and it's like you're limiting somebody's speech, one, and two, you're limiting the ability to think and the ability to comprehend, the ability to have a discussion. And once you get to that point, then violence is the next step. And we see it everywhere in the United States right now. All the protests turned riots, and then riots turned civil war. And that's the next step that they really need. The people that control both political parties of the United States need. They need a civil war because that is the ultimate excuse for martial law. And once martial law happens, the land of black helicopters is nigh. Like, people can be disappeared easily, especially in a COVID lockdown situation where people are already used to being huddled in their houses and already used to getting all their news from the television and already disconnected from humans via the face masks and via self-isolation, forced isolation. Who's going to really know? Who's going to really say anything if people come knocking at your neighbor's door and they get dragged away in the night, like, oh, they were a political dissident, oh, they had COVID, or oh, whatever, people don't have any trust, people don't have any social cohesion, communal belonging, communal sense of belonging. And so that's very dangerous territory, and it is almost better to be apathetic towards the political system, just to have apathy or just not really care about it, really, than to be vehemently interested in every aspect of it and be able to kill your neighbor for whatever their political choice was. Tim Dillon was saying, he had his last bit on Sunday, he was saying, in 2000, 7-Eleven was selling Bush or Gore mugs at their stores. And, there were a few incidences where people would throw the hot coffee in people's faces, if, oh, you voted Gore or you voted Bush, how dare you, there was a tiny amount. There was some stuff in the news, but you could still get away with it, and they still did it. These days, if you had mugs at 7-Eleven that said, Bush or Biden or Trump, how many confrontations do you think? What do you think the level of aggression would be inside that store? And there's safe zones, quote unquote, for people to be Republican, or safe zones, quote unquote, for people to be Democrat, depending on what state you're in, what region, what place, rural versus the big cities. But it speaks greatly to where we really are in the political divide, and how people are hyper agitated, hyper aggressive towards each other, and they're not really able to have any kind of logical, reasonable discussion. It just always breaks down to, you're evil, you're the reason evil exists in the world, and when it comes down to it, I will kill you. That's literally where people's minds are at, and I see it every day. And meanwhile, being an anarchist, which means I know that government is slavery. Doesn't mean I believe in chaos at all. Chaos does not mean chaos does not mean anarchy. They don't coincide at all. Anarchy means without, and then archy for archons in the ancient Greek, meaning masters. It means you don't believe in masters. Ergo, you don't believe in slaves. Ergo, you believe in freedom, human freedom, based on consent. And there's many people that say, oh, it could never work in that way. People can't just consent their way to everything. So you're agreeing that people have to be forced. People have to be under the threat of violence and duress to be able to have some kind of society. All of a sudden that becomes an uncomfortable conversation that people don't want to have, a line of thinking that people can't sustain. So the main point of the video today, the live stream, is to let people know that politics is there to divide you. It is a mechanism. It is not your friend. It doesn't care about you. And it really doesn't matter who you vote for so long as you vote. So long as you put your faith in the system, that's all it cares about. Because no matter who gets in, no matter who's voted into the office, government retains its power. And the people who control government from the shadows, they're unelected. They're always there. They always keep their jobs. They always keep their power. So remember that whenever you vote. You're voting for human slavery. And, if you must vote, know that that's what you're doing. But I hope that you feel good about it, because what you've done is you've said, I choose the lesser of evil, because I hope that somehow that will, as Tim put it, prevent the inevitable from coming sooner. And it's like the inevitable is still coming, because you've still voted for evil. You've still added another feather to the scales of doom. It's like whenever you vote for the lesser of two evils, here's the scales. What is right, what is true is on one side, and what is not true and what is evil is on the other. When you vote for the lesser of two evils, you're always voting for what's wrong. Always. And so for what's right is losing. Every single time. You cannot vote for the lesser of two evils and not still get evil. So I tell people this, and people ask me, then why do you keep making these pro-Trumpish posts on Instagram and stuff like that? It's like, I'm basically making fun of it all and saying, anybody that believes in any of it is just a child. They can't come to grips with the reality of the world. They can't come to grips with the fact that we are all slaves to our own devices. We have made a wall, a prison around ourselves. It's like the tarot card, the devil. It's the perfect example. There's the man and the woman, and there's the devil behind them on a throne. And both the man and the woman have chains around their necks. And you can clearly see that those chains around their necks are so loose. Just take off the chain and put it away. But they choose to remain there. They choose to remain inside their own prison, inside their own hell. And so long as people continue to choose hell, choose the devil, regardless of what you believe in religious terms, they choose to remain in suffering. And so I want people to really realize that civil war and the spark of a civil war and the coming martial law, that's the plan. Doesn't matter if Trump wins, doesn't matter if Trump loses, they want the civil war. Why? Because if a civil war happens and there's a martial law, that's the fastest way for society to change. They did these studies, I think it was like Black Rock Mountain studies or something like that, where they said, they did it for years. How can we change society the most completely, the most quickly? And they looked through every single possible way for years, and every time they concluded war or civil war or martial law was the fastest way to reorganize society. And the technologies that we have available right now, the ones that are public at any rate, are so advanced, so crazy, that the fourth industrial revolution is here. It's already happening. And the system of fractional reserve banking, all the robber barren capitalism, which isn't capitalism at all. It's just they control the levers of power, has been going on for so long now that, you know, its inevitable and doomed collapse has come. And so they've used this COVID scamdemic. You know, the virus is real, but the the things that they're telling you about it are lies. The things that they're saying you need to do are totalitarianism. They are oppression, you know? And if we let it happen, then it'll be all on us. They're just like, they're giving you a choice. Will you take these lies and this bullshit? Or will you embrace your own humanity and say, you know, I need my fresh air. I need my family. I need love. I need truth. I need freedom. If I don't have those things, then life isn't worth living. And it's like, for me, it's I would always rather die on my feet than live on my live on my knees as a slave. And I think a lot of people really do feel that way in their hearts, but the social conditioning is so strong. It's so strong. And the years and years of pressure and judgment on them. And, you know, if you just look at simple things like flicker rates on television and putting people into a highly receptive state over days, much less months, much less years, much less decades, you know, much less a century, because that's how long television has been around now, or pretty much almost a century. I'm not sure exactly when, but it's really advanced technology, and that alone has really fucked with the human being. And now you look at the damage to Wi-Fi, to human life and stuff like that, to sperm count, to be able to think. Like, how many people are complaining about having brain farts and brain stutters and not being able to think clearly, not being able to remember things as easily? Just out of the blue, suddenly somehow so many people are becoming schizophrenic or having Alzheimer's like symptoms. This is not by accident. And you could say, oh, well, you know, that's just people are getting sicker and weaker. And yeah, they are getting sicker and weaker, and people are getting more and more disconnected from human beings, more and more disconnected from nature, more and more disconnected from everything that we came from. So there's inevitable collapse of our ecology, of our society in that way. And the elites, the super elites, the super uber elites, the ones that, you know, like anybody that you see on television is just as a puppet, is a lieutenant at best within the higher ranks of the elites, the true elites, the Illuminati of the New World Order, the power brokers, the psychological masters of, you know, deception, the sorcerers, whatever you want to call them. These people you don't hear about. You know, even like the J.D. Rockefeller or the Rothschilds, you know, yeah, they're like the super elite families, but then there are hyper uber elites above them even, who are just not in the news. They're not spoken about. They have remained in the shadows because they were a class above every other class, born from the tops of, like, let's say the Rothschild family or the Rockefellers. Like, their best and brightest would be born in private. No one would ever know they were even born. And they live in secret societies unknown to the world. They have no birth certificate. They're a non-person. They're a non-entity. And they are a group of people that are above the law. You know, they don't exist on any file, and they live in worlds where they have the access to the absolute best of everything, but not towards decadence, towards mastering the objectives of the group. And so they were given the best history books, the best education possible, the best nutrition, the best exercise, all in hopes that they could be the uber people who would continue the legacy of their families. You know, it's like going to the most elite of elite schools. Like, imagine Princeton or Yale or Harvard, and then only the tops of those schools would get to another level, and then the tops of that level gets to the final level. That kind of level of elitism. And these people don't give a fuck about the normal everyday person, not in the slightest. They could care less about you at all. You're just a pawn in a game to them, a game that they have been born to win, a game that is manipulated and rigged in every single way, and that's all they care about. So yeah, that's a lot of horrible stuff, Danny. So now what are some solutions? Well, some solutions are you go to whatonearthishappening.com, whatonearthishappening.com, and you start on episode 1 and you go all the way. The Buddha said there's only 2 mistakes you can make on the road to truth: not starting and not going all the way. And if you watch episode 1 to episode 240 or whatever it is now, you will not necessarily have gone all the way, but you'll have gone enough of the way to basically pull the blinders off. No one will be able to gaslight you. No one will be able to mind fuck you out the window or into some political scheme, to some game. You're not going to be a pawn in someone else's game. You're going to be able to say, it's just like in They Live, the movie They Live. Check it out, They Live. Once you put on the sunglasses, you can decode, all the bullshit. You can see the truth of what's really being said, what's really being communicated. And once you do that, then you'll be that much closer to freeing yourself and freeing all the people that you care about. If you really care about yourself, if you really have love for yourself, free yourself. Free yourself from the lies that have been perpetrated upon you, upon me, upon everyone. 4 centuries, 4 thousands of years. This is a long-running game. Nothing is new under the sun. All the stuff is just rehashed, rehearsed. And if you check out whatonearthishappening.com, or if you go to unslaved.com, that's Michael Tessarian's work. If you go to David Icke, if you go to what's his name? I'm blanking on it, but the book is called The End of All Evil, or The Most Dangerous Superstition. These books are nearly impossible to get. But if you go to unblockit.me, you will have access to 97% of the internet that is not allowed to be shown on Facebook or Google. That's right. Facebook or Google only allow you to see 3% of what's available on the internet. So if you want to see the other 97% that they don't want you to see, which you already know that the internet is massive, it's huge, right? There's so much, you can never see it all. Well, imagine there's 97% more of all that. I made this analogy the other day, and I said, it's like going into Safeway or something like that, and oh man, look at all this shit. And then you're like, but I didn't find this one thing that I was looking for. And then you go up to the front and you tell them that, and they're like, oh, you want that? Oh, yeah. Well, you don't have access to that. You don't have clearance. What? What do you mean you don't sell it? No, we sell it, but not to you. It's like, well, how do I get that? He's like, let me show you. And he takes you back, and he kicks open the door, and there's literally 97 back-to-back Costco's in one huge-ass room. More stuff than that Safeway. And he's like, have fun with it. And I make the analogy, and I love to make it over and over again. It's like the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they take the Ark of the Covenant and they just roll it into that immense warehouse facility where you don't even have any clue what kind of crazy shit is in there, right? And they wheel in the Ark of the Covenant. Just one guy, I don't remember if he was smoking a cigarette, but I just imagine him like Aliens 1, that guy with the cat was like, right, just a grunt, just wheeling in the Ark of the Covenant, whoop, and then he just puts it on a rack and he walks away, and it's just one of billions of secrets that the government holds. And I can't get the image out of my mind, but that's basically, just use that same analogy for the internet. If Facebook or Google block you from seeing 97% of the internet, what is in that 97% of the internet? It couldn't be the worst things imaginable, could it? I'm sure there's a lot of that, but maybe there's things in there that you should really know and have access to. So check out unblockit.me. The .me will change depending on your country, but once you put it in, it'll give you a lot of things. So scroll down, and you'll go to e-books, and you'll see LibGen, LIBGEN. And through there you can find The End of All Evil and The Most Dangerous Superstition. And you'll find out You'll have access to any book on the planet, basically. But those two books in particular, once you read them, you're like, huh, that's something to ponder. Peace, my friends. Take care of yourselves. Don't stress too much about the election and all that stuff. Remember, it's all just smoke and mirrors. None of it's real. You are the change. Get together with your neighbors. Love yourself. Be healthy. Get out. Get fresh, plenty of fresh air. Drop the mask. Don't even think about getting a vaccination. Humanity has survived millions of years and without any vaccinations through the most insane plagues and things in the world. We don't need a vaccination. All these tricked out vaccinations pushed by people who don't give a fuck about you, who are immune to liability, no matter how many millions of people. Imagine this is the circumstance right now. Legally, if every person on the world was vaccinated and every single person died, except for, let's say, one person who survived it somehow, they'd have no recourse against the company that did it because they're immune. They were given total immunity. So why do they need total immunity for something that is supposedly safe? Well, it isn't, and that's why there's a vaccine injury fund created by the government from taxpayers. They pay it, not the companies that create these crazy-ass things. So there's so much to look into, there's so much to know, but have faith in yourself. Get out there, breathe fresh air, talk to your neighbor, get to know people. This is not the new normal. This is the end of life, if you believe this is the new normal. How many people are afraid to even look at you? Like, if you get within 6 feet, they jump back in fear. Is that the new normal, where everybody is mistrustful and fearful of other people? And we all, where that goes? That goes straight to the Matrix. We will all be plugging in willfully to a Matrix, to an artificial virtual reality, if we cannot learn to overcome this fear and to really be able to be with each other. Or we will be an entire generation or several generations of people who will be so traumatized that only our children's children will have any hope of being social and loving with each other, if they're not all killed by the corporations and by the ecological catastrophes, Fukushima, all the Monsanto's engineered glyphosate, which is destroying our bodies completely and basically making us entirely infertile. Check out Zach Bush's work on that. He says basically if we don't reverse these chemicals, every single human being will be completely infertile by 2050. That's the end of humanity, period. Okay? By one chemical alone. Let alone all the crazy ass shit, all the biochemical warfare, all the electromagnetic warfare, the scalar weaponry, the 5G, the 6G, the 7G, Once all these things come into place, who will be left? Who will be left? I'll end it with this saying. When they came for the Jews, I said nothing. When they came for the gays, I said nothing. When they came for, the disabled, I said nothing. When they came for me, there was no one left. So don't let that happen. Don't let people pitch you against your neighbor, against yourself, against your own family members, against your own humanity, against your own biology. Don't let it happen. Don't let it happen. Peace.